So for all fathers and grandfathers and people that serve in the role of fathers, I wish them a happy Father's Day. The reason I start with that is because I forgot it was Father's Day and I don't have a Father's Day homily. So that's all you're getting. So, all right. So Jesus was moved with pity for them because they were troubled and abandoned. Jesus sent the 12 out to continue his mission. Today, he sends us out to continue his mission. We hear today that Jesus looked on the crowd with compassion. His heart was moved with pity for them. Sometimes we may forget that Jesus was both God and man, 100% God and 100% man. He had all the emotions that we have, and he showed all of those emotions. Many times when faced with a problem or maybe even a tragedy, we ask, where was God when we needed him? Well, the answer is that he was right there with you. As you wept, he wept. When Jesus looked at the crowd, he could have reacted with frustration or anger or antagonism, but he looked at them with compassion. They were like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus did not acknowledge their weakness. He looked at them and saw their great potential to be disciples. In order for this, they needed to be shepherded. Jesus knew that there were others who needed compassion. Can we see the need for others needing compassion? Others who are lost? Can we be disciples? Jesus says the harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. Many people are in need of shepherding. We must be disciples to work the harvest. We must lead others to be disciples. What happens if no one is available to work the harvest? The harvest is ruined. We can't wait for others to step forward to work the harvest. When Jesus sends the disciples out, he instructs them to do three things: proclaim that the kingdom is at hand, alleviate suffering by curing the sick, raising the dead, cleansing lepers, and confront evil by driving out demons. What great things. But he adds to do it with charity. Without cost you have received, without cost you are to give. I was taught that there was always someone better off than me and always someone worse off than me. I must give a hand and lift up all those who can use my help. Matthew devotes a lot of space naming the apostles. Simon, called Peter, his brother Andrew, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, James, Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot. They were fishermen. One was a tax collector. No one of high standing. But they all had one thing in common. They were all willing to die for Jesus Christ. Peter, also known as Simon or Simon Peter or Cephas the Rock, was one of Jesus' three main disciples, along with James and John. Like many of the apostles, Peter was a fisherman by trade, but he grew into one of the most prominent leaders of the early church after the resurrection. According to Catholic tradition, he was also the first pope. Peter is portrayed as impetuous, always speaking his mind and acting on impulse. Peter was crucified by Emperor Nero. He asked to be crucified upside down because he didn't believe he was worthy of dying the same death as Jesus. James and John were fishermen. Jesus nicknamed them sons of thunder. James asked Jesus if he and John could sit on either side of Jesus' throne in heaven, and unwittingly promised to follow Jesus into martyrdom. James was beheaded by Herod. James was a missionary to Spain, and his body is buried there. His shrine in Santiago de Compostela is still a destination for hundreds of thousands of pilgrims each year. John is known for taking care of Jesus' mother, Mary. Tradition says that John wrote 5 books of the New Testament, including the Gospel of John. John is the disciple whom Jesus loved. John died of old age. He preached in Ephesus and was exiled to the island of Patmos. But because he suffered so much, he is considered a martyr. Andrew was Simon Peter's brother. He was also a fisherman. Andrew was the first apostle called. Andrew was first an apostle of John the Baptist. Andrew is the disciple who finds the boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish at the feeding of the 5,000. Andrew was sent to Scythia, an ancient region in central Eurasia. Andrew was crucified and, like Peter, didn't consider himself worthy of dying the same way as Jesus. He was bound to an X-shaped cross, which became a symbol known as St. Andrew's Cross. He hung there for 3 days, preaching the entire time. Philip, like Peter and Andrew, comes from Bethsaida, a town near the Sea of Galilee. Philip's most notable moment in the Gospels is his role in bringing Nathanael to Jesus. Jesus tests Philip by asking him, where should they buy bread to feed the crowd of 5,000? Philip asks Jesus to show them God the Father. Jesus responds by saying, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Philip is thought to be the one that asked Jesus if he could bury his father before following him. And Jesus replied to him, let the dead bury the dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. It is thought that Philip was crucified upside down with Bartholomew. Philip preached to the crowd while hanging there. The crowd wanted to release the 2 disciples, but Philip told them to free Bartholomew and leave him hanging there. Bartholomew is always associated with Philip. It is thought that he is the same person known as Nathanael. He may have said, when first hearing about Jesus, Nazareth, can anything good come from here? But later, after he knew him, said, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Bartholomew was allegedly flayed alive and then beheaded. Matthew was a tax collector. He collected taxes for Rome from his fellow Jews in Capernaum. This was considered traitorous. But even worse, tax collectors extorted the Jews, demanding more than they actually owed. It would be unthinkable that Jesus would call Matthew. But it shows a powerful picture of how God partners with all kinds of people. Matthew was martyred by being beheaded. Thomas was known as Doubting Thomas, prompting Jesus to say, when Thomas saw for himself, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. He is also known as Didymus, which means twin. Thomas was a missionary to India and died there being pierced with a lance. There's a lot of confusion on the identity of James, the son of Alphaeus, since James was such a common name. Tradition says that he was shoved from the pinnacle of a temple, beaten with a club, and then stoned to death. Thaddeus was also known as Jude, and may be the least known among the apostles, other than the fact that he is always named in the list of apostles. Simon the Zealot may have belonged to a Jewish sect known as the Zealots, who were bent on revolution. It could also mean that he was zealous for Jesus and his teachings. It is commonly believed that he was martyred. The traditions and beliefs concerning the apostles are not always clear, but we can assume that they were all common men, not scholarly, rich, or famous, with weaknesses. No one in this church, from the youngest to the oldest, can be thought of as any less than the apostles. But they all followed Jesus. Eventually, they all believed that he was the Son of God, and they all preached in his name and were martyred for him. We can all be disciples of Christ.